Oh, okay. I need to call you. Oh, I didn't want to call you. Where am I?
Oh, I got it right there.
No, no, no. But there is some issue. You have to want some call. None. None. Yeah, they rejected it. That's okay. No
behalf of our families and marriages as we now resume our traditional responsibilities.
Family, we reserve the rows here at the platform. Please take your seats. If you don't want to hold on to it, you can always give it back to me. Okay. Thank you much. Yes, you can sit side to side as well. Thank you, family.
Senai ele harim me'ayin yavo ezri me'im Adonai Ose shamayim va'aretz al yiten lamot raglecha al yanum shomerecha hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael Adonai shomrecha Adonai tzilcha al yad yeminecha Yom hashemesh lo yakeka ve'yareach balayla Adonai yishmorcha mikol ra yishmor et nafshecha Adonai yishmor tzetecha uvoecha me'ata ve'ad olam. I turn my eyes to the mountains from where will my help come. My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. Adonai will not let your foot give way, your guardian will not slumber. The guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. Adonai is your protection, a guardian at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from all harm and guard your life. Adonai guards your going and your coming, now and forever. Adonai Natan, Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. God has given, God has taken. Praise be the name of God. In the words of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven. a time for dancing, a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. The time of mourning is a complicated time, filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. And we've begun our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers linking Norman's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God. We've come here today not only to mourn the loss of Norman Kerzner, but to celebrate his life. And from what I understand, his life was a celebration. He was loved so deeply by his family. And he was an exceptional father. From what I was told, there was no one like him. He absolutely loved his children, and in turn they loved him. The greatest honor you can do to a parent is return the love that they've given you when you were a child. We start out as children and we listen to our parents, and hopefully we grow to be strong and caring adults. But there comes a time that the responsibility shifts. We go from child to parent, and more often than not, caregiver. Norman was blessed. He was blessed with family that cared, family that loved him deeply, and believed that he deserved nothing but the best. And they sacrificed themselves, they sacrificed their power to earn a living. Because Norman was an exceptional father. And I only wish that more children felt that way. We're blessed today. We're blessed today, and Norman is blessed today. Because to honor him, we're going to ask first Barry Gord to come forward and tell us a little bit about him.
Changing the routine a little bit. I'm here with your daughter. I met Norm when we worked together at Towers Discount. Norm was called in to replace me as I was leaving for another position. Although this was not an obvious way for our paths to cross, it was a meeting that led to a 63-year friendship. Over the course of time, I knew Norm to be a calming presence. He was a quiet man who never had a disparaging word to say about anyone. He was a family man who spoke highly of his wife, children, and grandchildren. He was always willing to share his pride in his children's accomplishments. In all of his years with Harriet, he was the most dedicated husband I have ever seen. He was always available to support Harriet. It was always beside her through all their life's journeys. Norm was extremely proud of his sons and their accomplishments. It was these moments, along with so many others, that Norm shone proud of their successes. Norm was so happy when he got to spend time with his grandchildren. Over the years, when he spoke of them to me, it was always evident that he cared deeply. Norm was a man unlike any other. It was my privilege to call him my friend. In the end, he had left behind a wonderful legacy. Please, Sarah, go ahead, sweetie.
I'm Sarah. I'm my Zeta's firstborn grandchild. We had an unbreakable and unshakable bond, one I will feel the absence of every day. This Wednesday, as I sat with my Zeta, I wept and I begged him to let me know where I will find him. No longer would he be a phone call away, his personalized, warm, long hello there to embrace me on the other side. No more would I be able to check in and let him know that I'm okay, Jax is okay, my family's okay, work, school, boyfriends, life, friends, they're all okay in just under 3 minutes. We'd shoot the breeze about anything, from recanting my days on the hills while skiing to letting him know I'll call him back as soon as I take my bread out of the oven. He was just happy to know that all was well. I visited my Zeta a few weeks ago before a quick trip to Vegas. Trying to distract from the elephant in the room, I chatted to my ailing Zeta of all the fun plans my friends and I had. We would see concerts, we'd gamble, we'd swim. We'd be making the memories my Zeta always encouraged me to make. I'd be living in the moment, aware that these were the good old days and Zeta had frequently reminisced on. He'd say, Sarah, I'll tell you, you've got to enjoy the good old days because one day they'll be gone and you wish you knew when you were in them. As I sat in the aftermath of losing my Zeta, I quickly began to scramble for ways to think of where I would find him. Our late Zadie passed, and he was a cab driver. And we think of him with every drive we take, with every old-fashioned cab we see. Our great-grandfather's a robin, our great-grandmother's a butterfly. Little things that we know that are our family checking in on us, looking out for us. As I was looking through the pictures from my weekend in Vegas, I saw my Zeta. These memories, these good old days. Knowing and embracing life is where my Zeta can be found. My Zeta is in acts of kindness, from chatting with a Walmart greeter to checking in with an old friend. My Zeta picked me up every day from the subway after work during my summer internships in undergrad. Once he brought me a water bottle, figured he'd be thirsty. I thanked him and told him that I was. Every single time after that, a cold water sat waiting for me. Another time, he thought I'd want a bowl of cherries. After I told him how much I loved them, they were there, washed, in a bowl in his car, along with him, at Finch Station at 6 o'clock, waiting for me. The highlight of both of our days. I ask everyone to please honor my Zeta by enjoying our happiest moments. Embrace your friends, check in often. Look, love and spread warmth and kindness. Be present and enjoy the good old days before they become one of the good old days. Thank you.
Thank you. Jordan?
My dad was a very unique man. Everyone who met him loved him. He was kind, friendly, gentle-hearted, and did everything he could to make sure his family was taken care of. I say he was unique not only because of that, but because of all the things I only learned really during the last 3 years or so. It's amazing how you can know someone your whole life, but not really know them. Now, my dad, he was OCD. Never diagnosed, of course, but that wasn't a thing back then. But there's no denying it. Never in my life have I known someone to be so set in their ways, so regimented, that they couldn't handle it if even one thing was off. Now, of course, it all makes sense to me. Why we went on trips many years ago, he was always rushing us out the door to get to the Windsor-Detroit tunnel because we couldn't be stuck in a long line. He had an agenda, and somehow, even long before GPS, he knew when the tunnel would be relatively empty, and we had to be there exactly then. I should have organized this. While he was in the hospital, even when he was very sick a couple weeks ago, his main concern was with his Walmart bill and getting behind on balancing his checkbook. He'd say it's been over 3 weeks and he hasn't been able to keep on it, and it made him very upset that he was so behind. He was also unique in that he hated technology. Maybe not hated it, as much as he didn't understand it. He only used a computer when he had to work, when working for Durox, and there wasn't a day he didn't complain about it and how he had to ask for help, something he never liked doing. He definitely didn't understand cell phones. We tried to get one for him, or to use my mom's when she was in the hospital, but he always refused. He was so old school, and I really do believe that phrase was meant just for him. When he fractured his pelvis and was on bed rest, I'd be there helping him, and he'd tell me to go upstairs to get his checkbook. Of course, he'd tell me exactly where it was, even though I've known for 51 years where he puts it, because it's always in the exact same place. And then he'd say, "Get my adding machine from the dresser. Middle drawer on the left-hand side." I didn't think much of it until I got up there, and I opened the drawer, and there was the calculator. And I laughed, because who but my dad would call it an adding machine? That's all he needed it for. The other functions were useless to him, so that's his adding machine. He'd also ask me to make photostats or Xeroxes of things for him, because he didn't know it's called a photocopy now. But that's what made Norm Norm. I know that the past 3 years really brought me closer to him. I got to know him in a way I never expected, and I will always cherish the time I got to spend with him. I have a lot of great memories with him, from early on going into sports fame to hang out for the day, to him bringing Mitch and I along with him to coach his B'nai B'rith baseball team and letting us feel like we were a part of the team by keeping score and being the bat boys, to going with him to his parents' house every Sunday to watch wrestling and play on the veranda, to hitting the ball to us in the backyard of the house. And not once do I ever remember him complaining about dragging us along. He worked long hours and tried to spend as much time with us as he could, and I think he did an amazing job of balancing it all. I'm sure right now he's already up there, signed up to be a coach for baseball, has all his bills properly checked and double-checked, and he's with his loved ones who have passed away over the years. I'll finish up by saying, Mom, I'm sorry you couldn't be here, but just know he was very devoted to you and loved you. And as he would say, he loved you eternally. I love you, Dad.
Thanks, Jordan. I'm going to ask Mitch to come up now.
Just as Jordan referenced, unfortunately, my mother can't be here. I know she's watching on the stream, so 50 years together, and it's a real shame that she can't be here to be with my dad, but I know that she's watching, and we love you, Mom, and we miss you, and you're here with us. Norm Kerzner. Some people called him Norman. Growing up, he was known as Normie to most people, but most people actually ended up calling him just Norm. The names he was most proud to be called were Dad and Zeta, because that reflected his family, and Dad's biggest joy was family. Growing up in downtown Toronto, where he went to King Edward Public School in Central Commerce, Dad was extremely close to his parents, Sam and Rivka, and as the youngest child in the family, was adored by his sister Esther and brother Mervyn. Dad took every opportunity to see his family, spending Sundays taking us to his parents and siblings to do what he could to help them in any way. Every day, no matter what, he would speak to his parents, usually going over what happened during the day. I continued that tradition with my dad, making sure we speak no matter which city I was in. Hearing his voice was always calming and reassuring. He would start every conversation with a, "Hello, Mitchell," and we would discuss our lives and make sure we were okay. Then when it was time to go, he'd always say, "Take care, bye for now." It is a tradition that I hope to do with my children, Sarah and Jaxie. Growing up, Dad was a great athlete and loved sports. He was on 2 city championship teams in both baseball and basketball and was invited to try out for the Toronto Maple Leafs of the Inter-County League. He was a speedy center fielder who loved the game and his teammates, people who he forged lifelong friendships with. Friends were easy to come by for him, as he would always go out of his way to help others, thinking of everyone else before himself. If you were to define Dad in one word, it would be simple. He didn't care about technology. He didn't have a cell phone, a computer, and never went on the internet. He didn't want a file folder and a pen were all he needed, and his organizational skills, as Jordan pointed out, were better than any computer. He didn't care what others did or didn't have. He only cared to provide for his family and not get caught up in materialistic possessions. Over the past few months, when he fell ill, he asked me to call some friends of his, many I didn't know, to let them know of his health problems because he didn't want them to worry if he didn't speak to them for one of his many routine calls to check how they were doing. When I would explain that Dad wasn't doing well, they all said the same thing. He is the nicest man they ever met and couldn't think of anyone who would say a bad word about him. I know when I introduced him to my friends, they would talk to him and then come to me and say, "Who is that guy? He's way too nice to be your father." I wasn't sure if I should say thanks or not, but I knew what they meant. Dad loved to be active and couldn't sit still. He was always doing things around the house, cutting the grass, trimming the bushes, shoveling the snow, cleaning the eaves trough, even at 86 years old. Dad met my mom through a mutual friend. At first, they spoke on the phone twice for 4 hours each time. I would guess my mom did most of the talking. They then went on 2 dates before my dad went to the US for 9 months. When they next saw each other, he proposed and they got engaged. In 1965, they were married. Dad spent his working days first in the confectionery business before moving into his true love, sports. He worked in the sporting goods business, eventually having his own small store where he would treat customers so well they would come back. He would work long hours, and my mom would care for the kids and the house. Together, they created a nice life, raising 3 boys in a happy home. I remember Dad coming home after a long day at work, but still coming in the backyard and hitting ground balls to Jordan and I. He was so happy to be spending time and teaching us the game he loved. I could go on with stories about how dedicated and caring he was for his wife and kids, but the stories would never end. Dad is a great man. Bringing happiness to everyone that was fortunate to be around him. In today's world, where there is a lot of hatred and turmoil, we need more people like my dad instead of losing them. In a nutshell, Norman Kerzner is one of the good guys. Since he fell ill, first with a staph infection, then with his failing heart, I've lived with my dad, and I've got to know him on a deeper level than I had in the previous 54 years. We became more than father and son. We became best friends. I wouldn't trade the past 6 months for anything. It was the greatest honor I have ever had to take care of my dad, as he has spent his entire life taking care of me. Last week, Jordan and I arranged for my mom to come home to see Dad for what turned out to be the final time. Watching them hold hands and the love for each other was overwhelming. We took a family picture of the 4 of us, and it is one of the most cherished things I own. As my mom was leaving, my dad, who was short of breath, held her hand and told my mom, "I love you eternally." I don't think I will ever witness a more beautiful and pure moment for the rest of my life. I want to thank some very special people for helping when he needed it the most. To my brother Jordan and his wife Danielle, who are always there to do whatever is needed, and they made food for him every week to make sure Dad had enough to eat. Jocelyn, who has dropped everything to come and spend 2 weeks with my dad when he fractured his pelvis. She risked everything but put my dad before herself and drove 10 hours to help him. Dad wasn't a person who sat me down and lectured about life. Instead, he taught by life experience. When I was around 14, he told me to enjoy those days as they were the best days of your life. No responsibilities, and just to have fun. At the time, I didn't believe him, but as the years passed, I thought often what he said and how right he was. His final lesson to me was one that he didn't say, but once again learned through experience. In taking care of Dad, I learned to become a more caring, compassionate, and empathetic person. I hope to be a better person for caring for him and will live a better life moving forward because I learned from being with him in the last 6 months. As someone who is known to plan everything, Dad passed peacefully at his home, which he provided so proudly for his family and where he wanted to be. He was surrounded by those who loved him and was not in any pain. He knew and accepted that it was his time and went gracefully. My dad will be missed terribly by my mother, Jordan, Danielle, myself, Jocelyn, and his 9 grandchildren. There will be a void that can never be filled, but he will always be thought of and remembered in the fondest way. While I continue to speak to my dad every day in my own way, this is the final time we will be together. So, Dad, for the last time, take care and bye for now.
Please rise. שוכן במרומים, המצוי מנוחה נכונה, המצוי מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה. במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים, את נשמת נפתלי אבא בן שמואל ורבקה, שהלך לעולמו, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו. אנא בעל הרחמים, הסתירהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור חיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו. וינוח בשלום על משכבו ונאמר אמן.
The pallbearers, please join me in the altar.
אדוני רואי לא אחסר, כי נוטה שירביצני, הממנופות ינעלני. נפשי שודד מנחני, במגלי צדק, למען שמו. גם כי רק בקיצר מוות לא גיררה.